Crouse.
Describe the working relationship between you two, because I mean, it's not unheard of to have teams of directors, but it's not that common.
Yeah, you know, Jay and I are very, very close personally, but also we kind of share a very similar sensibility, which happens with a lot of siblings. You know, we've been fed the same art growing up. Our sense of humor has been cultivated, you know, and curated essentially by HBO, so 1981 to 1989.
Right.
And so, you know, when we're working together, it's a very silent process. There's not a lot of discussion. We know when we like something. It's very shared. There's very rarely a disagreement. And then Jay's on the camera, and you know, I'm in the monitors, and we both split up and deal with actors, and we tend to give them little secrets, so we kind of tag team people. And I tend to be a little bit more on the producerial and writing end of the front of the movie, where Jay quality controls everything I'm doing.
Right.
And then on the back end of the movie, Jay and our editor, Jay Doobie, tend to really head that front up, where I play more of a quality control role.
And do you work with the same people? You say our editor. Has he worked with you on?
He's worked with us on all of our movies. Our main group of people. We've since expanded that crew a little bit. You know, the core people are still there.
Right. Well, this film, I'll get to you in just a sec, the other question. This film is a little different, because I'd read where before you made Cyrus, the most people you had ever had on set was like 10 people or something like that. And a studio film, you know, there's 100 people standing around. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that, and just the idea of having to change. I mean, bigger, not necessarily better, or it's different anyway.
You know, we're very aware that the types of naturalism and the performances that we get are a product of an intimate set, and we were terrified when we were about to make a studio film, because we knew that the unions were going to require that, you know, 70 plus people were going to be there. So we, ahead of time, started devising schemes to keep people off set, basically. And, you know,
booby traps.
Yeah. We created like a video village, and people would wait in there, and they weren't allowed on set until not after we said cut, but until we allowed them to go in and touch actors up. I mean, it's unbelievable, the machine that happens. And you know, you got to park 20 trucks in the neighborhood, so. You know, 3 weeks ahead of time, the locations guy comes to you and says, "Where can I put the trucks? Or are you going to look in this direction?" And we say, "I don't know. Is John Riley going to go in that direction?" You know, and so it was definitely challenging for us and for the people on the crew. But we just made sure that we hired people who loved what we did and respected what we did and wanted. And didn't see it as a pain in the ass, but saw it as like a privilege to make a different kind of film, and saw it as a challenge and a fun thing to work in a little bit of a different way. And you know, so we just created that experience, and it worked out really well. It's not to say that it was without glitches, but you know, when it came down to shooting, you know, a scene, it was the actors, myself, another cameraman, and a boom operator on set, and that was it. And so they pretty much, you know. It was them in a house and a couple other guys around, but they didn't feel the masses.
Which also kind of reflected the way you had worked before.
Yeah, that was very similar to how we worked.
We had to synthetically create intimacy, basically.
Right.
You know, just create a machine.
There's a question there? Yeah, I'll get to you.
When you guys write characters, how do you balance kind of like the long-standing relationships you have and ideas you had about these people with sort of like the new direction, kind of open possibilities that I imagine come with the project like that?
The question was, how do you balance, you know, the characters you've written versus the characters they've become while you're improvising once you cast them? And for us, it's, you know, I mean, we haven't really said this between each other, but for me, you know, our preconceived notions are completely subordinated to the things that the actors are bringing, because usually if cast them for the right reasons, they understand the story. If they're doing something out of bounds, obviously we knock them back in. But in terms of nuance within that character and trying to achieve the basic story arc and goals of that character, you know, what the actor is inspired by and what they're in love with is usually what we want to see, because it's going to have them bring the best stuff. And it's like parents, where you're kind of like guiding them a little bit, you know, make sure they don't go off the tracks, but letting them follow their bliss so you get the best stuff out of them. I mean, more to that is that we found that no matter how good an actor is, who that person is who's playing your character and what they're going through in their life at that point in time has infinitely more control over the pitch of that character and the tone of that character. And the improvisation that happens on that day is just an extension of that. It's a small percentage of what you're getting from that person. And, Mark and I, our number one rule in filmmaking is to never rest on your laurels. Always be aware of what you're actually getting in that moment. Because if you're thinking about what you wanted 2 years ago when you were sitting in front of that computer, you're not living in the real world, and you're not going to have your eyes open to what you're truly receiving. So we feel like that's kind of like one of our best assets is just our ability to be willing to throw it all away and just accept what you're getting now and make the best of that.
We just have time for one more question, and it's right here. Yeah,
Are we good?
Oh, it's going to be the worst one. I have a question regarding, I guess, kind of a two-part question.
We just have time for one. I'm sorry now. Yeah.
Coming from working from a smaller budget, suddenly having, I guess, a big studio budget, did you feel like you had a little bit more freedom with writing, or did it immediately go to different aspects of the production? And also, did you write this film before you had any funding, or did you write it after you knew you had sort of funding for it?
Yeah, the questions are, did you write this film before you had funding for it? And did having a larger studio budget, how did it affect the working process?
Yeah.
We sold the movie as a pitch to Fox Searchlight, so they paid us to write it. So we always knew from the initial creative impetus of this movie that it was going to be something that could have a bigger budget. That being said, even though this budget was 500 times that of our other movies, most of that goes to union fees and trucks and drivers and crap and bullshit. We didn't feel like, oh, now we can blow up anything we want. It really feels, in terms of scope and size, eerily similar to the micro-budget level of things, because we were in the realm of studio movies about as small as a studio movie gets, So while we were eating really well, and there were, we didn't have to cook or hang lights and things like that, it definitely didn't feel lavish in any way.
There was infinitely more worrying about money during this movie than any of our previous
Really?
15,000. Absolutely.
Is that because you had to answer to people?
Yeah,
more?
to answer to people, but people were just freaking out the whole time about money.
It's a
you know?
concern.
It's like-
People get people get sensitive around money. I don't know what the big deal is. Like when we were making the puffy chair, Baghead, it was like there was no budget to conform to. It was like, this gas station costs $100, that one's free. We should just do the $100 It's so much better, And then it comes out of our pockets, and so there's a little more rigor with the studio stuff.
Would you go back? I'll ask the question. Would you consider making films the way that you used to, sort of in between studio pictures?
Absolutely. We have plans and things in our back pocket of movies that we want to make. And, my wife Katie directed a movie that Jay and I helped produce for her. That's kind of a cool model we like, which is, bringing stars into the micro-budget fold, which is like, come work for us for peanuts, and we'll let you have a big chunk of the movie's back end, and we'll all have fun together. And now that we know a lot of actors, they wouldn't mind taking 3 weeks to go run around the woods with us with a video camera, and particularly if they've gotten off of Transformers or something. So I think there's a cool small movie model to be had.
Right on. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for coming. This is Mark and Jay Duplass. The movie is called Cyrus. It opens in Toronto on June 25th.
Richard Crouse.